Welcome back. We have two more sessions today, and the first session is on analysis of researchers' practices, and we are very fortunate to have Annaïg Mahé with us. And let me just tell you a little bit about her background. She's been an associate professor at, now I hope I pronounced this right, Office de Paris since 2005. If I did that wrong, I apologize. Her training and research themes focus on the evolution of scientific communication in the digital age and the information practices of researchers. So Annaïg will give her presentation, and then we'll take questions after that.
Yeah, and well, I begin with by thanking Gail and the organizers for giving me the opportunity to present our work. It's an honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity. My colleague and I have been working on the data we have collected in the HAL repository, which is, as maybe some of you already know, a sort of particular infrastructure in France, because as you can see here, researchers in France have the possibility to deposit their articles in different repositories according to where they work, where their affiliation is. And you can see, for example, if you are at the University of Toulouse, you have a repository here which is based on DSpace, for example. Archimer, Ifremer, sorry, has made, I should have swapped Archimer and Ifremer. Ifremer has set up its own repository, so based on a special server they made up themselves because they had special needs and constraints. And you have also Sciences Po, for example, who have its own server. But every researcher in France can use the HAL repository if it wish. And from other repositories, you can see that information can also be transferred to HAL. They don't all do that. Ifremer, for example, doesn't do it, but it is possible. It doesn't go in the other way around. HAL is particular because it hosts many views, many different views. It is a server with many views on disciplines. So you have, for example, life sciences, or a sub-portal of HAL, which is HAL SHS for HSS, Humanities and Social Sciences. But it also gives the opportunity for universities or research centers to have a portal on HAL where they can give a view of their research production. Another portal is for images, which is called MediHAL, and you also have another one which is called TEL, which is there for thesis and dissertations, etc. So mainly most universities in France have now a portal which is set up on HAL repository. And in the end, you can also have collections, which are a form of sub-portals for laboratories, journals, or any collection you want to set up on HAL. Our data, we have chosen to work on life sciences and humanities and social sciences. We began in 2012 with life sciences, and then we thought it was nice to do the same with HSS. And as you can see, HAL today is 1,300,000 deposits, and a third of it is full text. And for life sciences, you have the different parties here for life sciences and HAL SHS. And our data has been collected for life sciences, so between 2002, that is the beginning of when deposit started for life sciences on HAL, until 2012. And you can see it has grown quite a lot since we collected our data. And then we collected data for HSS from 2002 until 2016. So we have much more notices, deposits for this corpus. What I'll show you is just a glimpse of our results, because these data are very rich. So my colleague and I didn't have even the time to really use all that data. There's very, very much to do with it. So we wanted to know what kind of deposits were made according to the disciplines. So here you can see that for the life sciences, you have the different categories that can be posted on HAL, so articles, communications, and so on. And you can see here for life sciences, the category which is most used are articles. And it represents 4 out of 5 deposits. And that's quite, logical for these disciplines, because articles are their major publication output type. Here I'm talking about deposits for notices and full text. We'll see the difference afterwards. For HSS, you can see it's more diverse, because we have here 3 major categories of deposit, and which are journal articles, conference papers, and book sections. And this also represents the publication types which are most used in these disciplines. We can see afterwards that we have more peculiarities according to disciplines. Do we have full text or not full text? You might have seen at the beginning that we had 900,000 notices for 500,000 documents in HAL. So there are quite a lot of notices without full text. And here you can see first result, which is quite interesting, is that you have the same amount of full text and notices only in life sciences and in social sciences and humanities. So it's 1 document out of 4 deposits which has a full text, which is not much. At least it's not like archive, which aims to have full text for each deposit. And we have more detail here for HSS, where we can see that you have more full text, especially for preprints, working papers here, and reports. So what's interesting is that you can see that even if those documents which are deposited, the major deposits in HSS are, we have seen journal articles, book chapters, and conference articles. For notices or for all deposits, for full text, you find preprints, working papers, and reports, which means researchers deposit more grey literature in full text, and major publication types as notices without full text. For data here, research data, which are mostly images, photographies, and thesis, full text is mandatory. You cannot make a deposit without the full text. So all the others are voluntary deposits. So here we have added, sorry, I'm going a bit, full text or not full text, plus recent or older deposit. That's our choice. We have decided for the purpose of this study that recent deposit was a full text that was added less than 1 year after the notice creation date. And after that was considered as an older deposit. So we have life science and humanities and social sciences are two separate articles, but I've mixed them here and mixed the results for the purpose of this presentation. And you can see here some difference. I'm going a bit too fast. Just to show what we consider here as recent deposit and full text, for us, we thought we could call that direct scientific communication, which is what archive, as I already mentioned, aims at. That is the full text of the research directly at the almost as soon as possible available to other researchers. And that is this direct scientific communication. But you can also put older full text, which we called archiving. And then you have notices only. And there again you have recent deposit or older deposit. So here we have some differences between life sciences and HSS for full text. As you can see that in life sciences, they are more prone to deposit more recent full texts, even if you still have some texts which are older than 1 year. And in HSS, you have a bit more older full texts. So we can have several hypotheses, which could be maybe embargoes are longer in HSS, so that researchers are not able to put their documents before. Or maybe older texts are more valued, and so researchers are more willing to put them, to make them available on the repository. We were also curious to know who was responsible for the deposit. And here you can see that the majority of the deposit was made by an institutional intermediary. That means it is mostly information professional responsible for the library or for the local repository or the local portal on HAL. And you have only 26% deposit which are made by authors themselves. The external intermediary platform deposits which are made by Biomed Central, for example, or the ABES. These were the two platforms we had identified for life sciences, and we noticed that it started at 2010, when Biomed Central was pushing full text onto HAL, and ABES is the French agency for bibliography, and which is responsible for the deposit for dissertations, thesis. So we had also thesis in full text which were deposited by the abbess. But you can see it's still quite modest, even if it was augmenting in the last 3 years of our investigation. So it's the intermediaries which deposit more in the life sciences. And you can see here another difference for the humanities and social sciences, as here you can see we had some differences in our methodology, but here you can see that the deposits were made either half of them were made by authors or by another researcher from the institution. So that means you have more than half of deposits which are made by a researcher, author, or another one. An external intermediary, institutional intermediary represents only 40% of deposits. These numbers are not based on the persons, but on the documents, on the deposits that are made. So that means that half of the deposits are made by authors. And I have not put the numbers here, but we went a bit deeper in our analysis for HSS, and we counted that authors represented nearly 90% of the depositors in HSS. So that means that there are 90% of depositors who deposit 57% of documents. And if you read in the other sense, it means that institutional intermediaries represent nearly 8% of depositors, but they deposit 40% of documents. So they work harder than researchers. An external intermediary here, they were also abbess for thesis in social and humanities. And the other one was, it came from SPEAR, which is the repository from Sciences Po. So we wanted to know then who was responsible for what kind of deposit, full text or notices only. And that's quite interesting too, even if it's not a discovery, in a sense. You can see that in life science, intermediaries here will archive many notices without full text. So it's the yellow and the gray bar. And author, well, they deposit a bit of full text, but not very much either. And you can see that external platform deposit only full text. In HSS, you can find the same. That is, intermediaries archive also many notices without full text, and author archives much more recent or older full text than intermediaries. Then we wanted to know for disciplines more in details, at least for humanities and social sciences, as we didn't have the same details for life sciences. And here you can see, I haven't translated here the legend. So in red you have notices only by disciplines and full text. Yeah, it's big enough to be read. So you can see that education, library and information sciences, psychology, social anthropology and ethnology. And in a minor way, economics and finances, political sciences, geography, and linguistic, well, you can go down further a bit, are the disciplines which deposit the most full texts from all the others. And you can see here at the bottom of the line, law, which deposit, well, nearly only notices, hardly any full text. Art and art history, the same. So, well, it's no discovery either, even if it's nice to have more insight into particular disciplines, but it shows that you can understand what kind of deposits are made according to particular constraints or opportunities for different disciplines. As, well, in law, I don't know if it's because they're more aware about copyright policies. The system of publication is also different, as they're more often being paid for their publication. So maybe that prevent them from using as they wish the full text. Art and art history, you can imagine also that you have some copyright difficulties for images, paintings, or anything that has been used into the articles, etc., etc. And education and library and information science, what is interesting is that on HAL, anyway, these were the first two disciplinary sub-portal, because you had one portal for education and one portal for library and information science. Psychology, social anthropology, ethnology, economies and finances, and political science. The contents, part of the contents also come from SPEAR, the other repository, so it can help to feed the HAL repository. What you can see also when you go even deeper is that you can see that according to disciplines, there are different kind of deposits which are made. Which you can see here, journal articles, notices and full text. So almost notices, more notices for law than full text. Journal articles are more deposited by those disciplines, law, psychology, economy. Conference proceedings are more for business administration, education sciences, library information sciences and linguistics. And book chapters are more for history, art and art history, literature, history and philosophy of sciences. And it's interesting there to see also that it corresponds to major publication types in those disciplines. And what would be interesting would be to have data about publication outputs, French publication outputs, so we could compare what is being deposited and what is being published. So we could have a comparison between the two. Well, we don't have this data available, unfortunately. And then we added even another level of detail, because we wanted then to know by discipline which kind of deposit was made. So recent full text, older full text, or only notices, recent or older. So here I've ranked by the disciplines who have more full text, recent full text available. So you can see again library information sciences at the top of the list, then education, psychology. And library information sciences was actually one of, as I said, first sub-repository available in France by the name of Archive-SIC, which has been then integrated into HAL. So there is a sort of habit of depositing full text, recent full text, which is not as much often met in other disciplines. So here we can see factory in law. You have 4 notices, which is mostly what is deposited. Half is recent notices and half older notices. So that, in fact, we can see that this repository is mostly being used as a tool of visibility for researchers. It aims to enable them to say, well, my article exists, but the full text is not available, which does not go in the direction which was wanted by the administrators of HAL at the beginning. They wanted the same model as the archive, which was to make the full text available. And it was mentioned earlier that the archive, yes, it's quite a normal practice, habit for researchers to deposit the full text. Well, they had the habit of sharing their preprints, so before even that it was published. And I remember the first presentation of HAL in France to human and social sciences public, and they were saying, there were physicians telling HSS researchers and librarians, you just have to put your article on HAL even before it is published. And they were all very shocked. And that was the first barrier that you could understand. There was a big cultural barrier that would prevent researchers to deposit so easily their article, their full text. And their first fear was plagiarism. Well, it's not always the right reason. But so, to sum up this research, I just wanted to give a glimpse on our results. You can see that categories of deposit correspond to major publication types, but not on the contrary, but you have differences in disciplines, because when full text is deposited, it corresponds more to published papers in life sciences. There's no danger in depositing published papers and which have been published elsewhere before. And grey literature in HSS, because it helps also to, well, it's a literature which is not very well valued elsewhere. So it's a nice way of making it available to put it on HAL. Deposits are mostly made by intermediaries from the institution in life sciences, but by researchers or author herself in HSS. And we can also see mass deposit by intermediaries, because they represent only 8% of depositors in HSS. What is interesting also is to see the same amount of full text between HSS and life sciences, which is 1 deposit out of 4. And you can see here that it is a sort of result of a no mandate opportunity. There is no mandate or to deposit in HAL, no general mandate anyway. And I mentioned Ifremer at the beginning, so which has its own repository. Ifremer has a mandate since 2010, and they have more than 80% of deposits, full text, in their. So 80% of their publications are available on their repository, and there is a mandate, so it's a big difference, effectively. We can also see that we have many differences according to disciplines. We could have also analyzed differences between institutions, for example, or institutions through HAL. It's quite difficult because it is not normalized. It's quite difficult to have to know if these deposits is really affiliated to this institution, and we need to normalize more the title and level of institutions in HAL. It would be interesting also to make the same comparison between countries. So here we have data from a French repository, which is centralized, and it enables us to get many data. I should have mentioned at the beginning that we use the OAI PMH data protocol to collect the data, so it's open to anybody. And maybe we could use the same protocol on other repositories, but then we have to collect each repository to get the data. And we can wonder also what evolution we could get on this data, because as we saw at the beginning, these data are growing quite fast, and the landscape is also evolving, as we've seen already today. If we have mandates or incentives, it can change a lot the rate deposits are made. We can also have technical or organizational opportunities that can make also this rate of deposit grow. One incentive in France is the recent law for a digital republic, which allows researchers to deposit their full text 6 months or 12 months after the first publication date, according to disciplines, sciences or HSS. And we'll see if it enables researchers to deposit more. So it would be interesting to go again to this data and see, there is a study going on to see what the impact of this study, of this new law is on the deposit in HSS. So we'll see. And it depends also, when I mentioned technical or organizational opportunities, if we make it easier for the researchers. I mentioned Ephemer. Ephemer, there is a mandate, but there is also most of the deposits are made by the information professionals from the library, because it is a research center and they have enough staff to help them to do the job for them. If you go into universities, you don't have the same context at all. You don't have, information professionals are trying to motivate researchers, but they don't have the same amount of time available to do the deposit themselves. So it's not as rapid, as fast as at Ephemer, for example. So if we can have technical tools that can help researchers deposit faster, easier. So you have the Dissemin tool, I don't know if you've heard of it, which can help researchers to know which of their articles are already available, full text or not. So, it would be nice to go further on this data to see how it evolves. we have a last study which has not been published yet, and we are beginning to see people in HSS who were depositing regularly articles, and they suddenly disappear. They are not depositing in the last 2 or 3 years. So we were wondering where they're going, where they're disappearing. And we have not made statistical analysis, but we have just begun to see that, well, some articles were put on ResearchGate instead. So it could be interesting to analyze deeper what are the differences between these kinds of platforms and why researchers go into one or into another. So, well, that's it for
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mahé, for your very in-depth analysis of the HAL repository. We have some time now for a few questions. So are there questions? We have several. So Simona, there's one back there.
Thank you very much. I was wondering if you also have some figures that may relate to the user side to see, what's more, consulted or what's more downloaded, or to cross it with the data relating the deposit itself and to see if there are areas of particular interest in HAL, but from the user's perspective.
Well, these data exist for HAL, and when we made the first study about life sciences, we talked with Christine Berthaud at the CCSD, which is the organized institution that deals with HAL. And yes, we told her it would be very, very interesting to go into the other side to see, well, who are the users and what are the uses of these articles. And well, they have the data, so I don't know if they have the people and the time to do the analysis, but that would be very interesting, I suppose. You can see from time to time some data that are published on the front page, but that would be nice to have a detailed analysis. Yeah.
Okay, I think we had a couple more questions down here in the front.
Yes, thank you. Well, I have many questions for you, but I will just, for the sake of time, raise two here from the floor. One of them is actually I understand that what you are building is a sort of collection of repositories by harvesting. You don't transfer the documents; you just harvest. No, if you use OAH PMI, that means the documents are in the original repositories.
Mm-hmm.
You don't make a copy of them.
You mean the documents that are in HAL?
No, from the other repositories, because you are getting documents from other repositories.
We have only studied from the HAL repository, so we didn't.
Those that are directly loaded,
you see
there?
The other ones that
Yes.
I mentioned are other repositories,
Yes.
separate from HAL, but some of them can transfer the metadata to HAL,
okay.
but not the full text. Yes, the full text
it
remains.
can be full text, but
They transfer the full text.
yes. Yes. Well, and also I wonder, what are the incentives? I mean, why do people deposit in your repository? You said something about visibility, but I mean, if I as a researcher don't know how this is being used, why should I deposit in your repository?
Well,
it's not a mandate, you said. It's
no, it's no mandate. As I said, if you see closer at HSS, we've seen that those who are depositing the most are library information science, education. These are disciplines where people are motivated by open access. They want to share rapidly. Maybe the delays for publication are also longer, and they have less copyright trouble, so they can share easily. For other researchers, it's not that simple. So it really depends on disciplines. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have one more question. Didier?
Some answers to start, because I have also a management position in a CNRS, and as such, I'm part of a scientific and technical committee of the CCSD and so the Art Archive. First, HAL was conceived as, let's say, a French archive. I mean, the physics archive at the beginning. But in 2014, it changed completely of status. It became a national archive. That means that many French institutions, research and universities, said this is going to be the place where our production is going to go. So this change is really important into the process. That would lead me to a question to you. Some institutions had made their own things. So let's say legally, they either have to deposit on HAL or having their own stuff. And most of them done the Sciences Po stuff and so on. That is, they actually copy every thing they have as full documents to HAL. They push it. It's not HAL that is harvesting, it's these other archives that are pushing it to HAL. So that's one thing that is important. To the question of non-depositing, you have to imagine that there are at least 3 or 4 lives of these archives. At a point, for example, some people, especially librarians and so on, were thinking, okay, just say to them it's useful to put notices. And then we're going to have later the full documents. How do you do that? You say to them, you have to do reports every 4 years, now every 5 years for the French Agency for Evaluation. And you say, if you put every notice in that, then you just have to make an extraction. You don't have to do the bibliography all over again. So you see a peak into the notices at the time because people were doing that. Librarians for doing something completely different that is archiving, that is just a tool in order to build a bibliography of their own units and departments and so on. So it changed through time. But now it has become a national archive. And 2, because of a change, the way the full document was deposited. Because it was very harsh, for example, you needed to have metadata for every author. So if you're in humanities and social sciences, that means your close colleagues. If you're in biology, that could be like 55 people with institutions that are not known to the system. That means you have to enter everything for 50 authors or 60 authors or whatever. So it was much more difficult and much more author-oriented and rather like professional oriented. So it has changed too. Now you don't have the compulsory of the fulfilling of these other authors into the system. So that leads me to my question, which is rather a suggestion because I think you don't have the data. Would you look at the last 2 years are very different because the number of notices have gone down while the percentage of full text have gone up. So I think it would be interesting to look at this specific data. And finally, to answer to the question of a usage data, 1, it exists. 2, it's not been fully, let's say, analyzed because of lack of personnel. I mean, it's working on 15 people only. And finally, usage data is very interesting because you have so many problems with that. Before 2013, what they do is you had to go through the notice page and then to the document in order for the usage to be counted, in order to avoid robots. So that means that everyone was going through Google Scholar directly to the document was not counted. And then they changed this rule and so on. And of course, how do you put away real traffic from robots from any place that are just trying to do something on the web pages and so on? So the data exists, it's not consistent through time, and it's very hard to analyze.
Thank you. We're going to just take a brief moment now for the last two presenters to come up to the podium here, and then we will begin our fifth session. So Dr. Cheto and Schofel, if you could